Today, I have the beautiful Dawn McCarty on the Awaken Feminine podcast, and she's joining me all the way from Florida in the USA. Welcome to the show, Dawn.
Thank you for having me. So excited to be here.
So excited for our conversation because I know it's going to be amazing because I met you, gosh, quite a few months ago. And I was just like, I should have just recorded our conversation because that would have been just a
I
podcast.
know. That was a great conversation.
That was a great conversation. But Dawn, I always love to ask my guest this question before we dive into all things Dawn, and that is, what is your definition of an awakened feminine?
An awakened feminine.
Mm.
Oh, somebody that can embrace their power within, that has that authenticity to feel secure in everything that they need to deliver to the world because the world needs to hear us.
I love it. I'm getting full body tingles. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that definition with us. Now, Dawn, I would love for you to share with us who you are and what you do.
Sure. I am Dawn McCarty, and I'm the founder of Securing Everything, which is a global cybersecurity company. And I have over 25 years of experience in that industry. And my passion is securing the everything beyond the corporate worlds. So even though I might be in cybersecurity, I really want to focus in on protecting and securing the individual. So I'm a human behavior and social engineering expert, which allows me to keep you informed of the tactics and the things that the online predators and scammers do to try and scam you out of what's yours. So I've created a Safe Online Security Academy and the Digital Safe Zone. So I can help educate the average person, the non-industry expert, because I think that's our biggest group of people that if they knew how to protect themselves online, their data and their identity and their children, we would have such a big force of people helping to make everyone feel safer online. So that's a little blurb of what I do.
Mm, I love what you do. And the story behind what you do is so powerful. So I would really love for you to share with our audience why it's so important. Like, how did you start? Why are you so passionate about this? And yeah, how you got into this work.
Well, it's for a long time, I felt like I had no idea why I was in this going this direction and why I went through the not the cyber, the criminal justice school. You know, I got 2 degrees in criminal justice, and then I found out I'm afraid of criminals. So why am I in this industry? You know, working with them that close, I was like, I need to be home with my kids. I need to make sure that I'm around for them, and this really isn't going to, it just didn't feel like a good fit. So before I had done that, though, I was already working in IT, and the market crashed, and it was really hard to stay in those jobs. So I thought, oh man, I need something way more secure than computers because this is crazy. I'm not going to be able to raise my kids on something that's so volatile, thinking computers was not a good industry to be in. And then, I went through the schooling and came back out, and I ended up saying, well, I think I'm just going to go back into computers. So what I have done is I've aligned what I learned in criminal justice and human behavior and victimology and all of those things, the psychology behind all of that. And I've tied it into the security piece of what I do in cybersecurity. So I see things a lot differently than most people do because of that experience and also my lived experience that I have from a kid, and how that's really how I ended up in this direction. Because for a long time I'm like, where am I going? What am I doing? What do I really want to be when I grow up? And it was really kind of a distant thought where I just didn't know what that was or what it looked like. And I was just raising my kids until 2020 came, and the world changed. And I had an epiphany at that point that was like, there's so many people working and schooling from home right now, and we were nowhere ready for that, to protect their devices and how they connect to work or to school. And it was very scary for me because I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we have criminal, cyber creeps or cyber criminals, cyber hackers, whatever. I like to call them cyber creeps because it kind of encompasses all of them.
Mm.
And it's a little less um, industry terms, or it's the lingo when you call someone a hacker, because we have good hackers too. So I'm just going to call them cyber creeps. So we have a lot of cyber creeps that are constantly coming after corporate America data. And now we have that data being accessed from homes. Well, are our home networks secure? I don't know. I don't know how everybody secures their home networks. And that's what made me think, oh my gosh, we really have to do something to get this into the homes. But the epiphany came when I realized that there's such a huge increase in the reportings of online grooming and enticement and predators than ever before. So the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children had a 92% increase. And that's when I realized my purpose has always been leading me to this particular place in my life where I did not have a secure childhood. I did not have a safe childhood. I was faced with physical violence and abuse, where today's children face a lot of that online. And because of the world presence of the global internet, it can be so much more magnified for children today. So the internet is not a safe place for children to be unsupervised or undersupervised. But when I started really thinking about this, it's like I've always been protecting someone or something. Sometimes that was myself. So having a secure childhood to me would mean everything. And I think security for children, they need that security. And it is everything to them. So as they're growing up, they need to feel that security. They need to feel that safety. And I did not have that. So that's why I've named my company Securing Everything, because security is everything. And it's not necessarily about everything needs to be secured, which is true, but it's really about it. Security is really everything to a lot of people. So I then realized that my purpose was aligned with the fact that I am in a position today where we have the internet and I have these skills and I have that education and I have that lived experience where I can speak to anybody with authority and with the experience and the knowledge and everything that I need about the need to protect children online. And not just children, everybody needs to feel safe online. So I want to make cyber simple, because the simpler I can make cyber for individuals, they know somebody that has children. So it doesn't just apply to parents, it applies to everybody, because we have parents, we have guardians, we have carers, we have school teachers and counselors, we have law enforcement and emergency units and all kinds of different type of people that have access to children that need to know how to keep them safe and how to secure their everything. So it's kind of like a very shortened version of how I got here. But having that security, I think, is so important today, because not knowing how to protect your kids online has got to be super scary. And kids are way more technical than a lot of parents. Kids were born in an era that these devices existed in the home. But when some of us were born, there was no device in the home, and the cell phone was huge. So only one person in the family might have had a cell phone. We had the pagers. I don't know if you remember those with the number that came across the top. And yeah, those were the old-fashioned technology.
Showing our age.
I know, but it's true. So we have this parenting gap where a lot of times, when we were kids, or when some of us were kids, we had that transgenerational knowledge passed down from generations before us. But now we have a parent group that doesn't have knowledge on the internet passed down to them because their parents didn't know anything about the internet. So now we have a new frontier, basically, of trying to catch up with technology now, getting parents caught up to technology so that they can protect their kids because their kids might be technology experts, but they are not security experts. And the parents really need to step into that role and they need the knowledge on how to do that. It's not their fault that they don't know because it wasn't shared. So now, as an expert, that's what I'm bringing. I'm bringing that cyber made simple to average people, normal people, somebody that doesn't work in the industry but just needs that information because I think it's everybody has a right to be safe online.
Yeah.
So there's that.
I love what you do. And as a parent to two young children, it's it scares me that they go like my older one's 8 now, or turning 8 soon, but she's starting to use the computer a lot more and it freaks me out. Um, you know,
Yeah.
um, luckily she's not on any like social media or any type of things, but I did have her on Skype so that, if I duck out quickly, then she has a way to call me. And I think she was on the computer one time and some random person messaged her and she freaked out. And she's like, "Oh my God, mommy, I don't know who this is." So it's just so important that we get taught this. And I mean, I come from the generation where I did have computers. I think at home we had a computer when I was 12. So I, kind of grew up getting into that digital age. So have a bit more understanding. But if you ask me about security, I don't know. When I started using computers, there was like social media like ICQ, like the that's how they used
Oh
to
my
come up.
gosh.
Oh gosh,
Wow.
you
Takes me
know,
back.
um, ICQ, and then you know even back, I mean, it wasn't sophisticated then. We didn't have all our personal information like on Facebook where everyone can access. How do we protect ourselves from that? Like I question those things, but I would not have a clue where to even start. I mean, the only thing I know is I have Norton on my computer and I I guess
And
that
it
protects
does
me.
something.
Yeah, it does
Yeah.
something. It protects me from viruses, but that's the extent that I know. So, what you do is so important. And I want to dive a bit further into that. But I would really love for you to share your story about your childhood. So, because I can feel the passion coming out of your voice with why you do what you do. And just to give the audience more context about why this is so important to you, if you don't mind sharing your story, that would
Oh,
be
sure, sure.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was abducted when I was almost 5 years old, and I was playing outside in our apartment complex, and it was a U-shaped apartment complex, so we were kind of concealed inside. And I was running up the stairs to my babysitter's house when I heard someone calling my name, and it took me a minute to figure out who it was. And they had to call me several times, and after this the second time calling me really loud, they said, "It's your mother." And I stopped. I'm like, "Oh." And then I realized who it was. And so I ran down to her because I hadn't seen her in a while. So we were estranged for on and off for a couple of years where she had moved into her own apartment, but she left me with my father. And we'd visit with her a couple of times. We'd go over there, and I would always go home with my dad. So I wasn't staying with her at all. And then she eventually just left the state. This was in Hollywood, California. And when she left, she moved to Colorado and she met and married someone else. And when he found out that she had a daughter and he had a daughter, they wanted to set up family and bring all of the kids and living under one roof. So they concocted this plan to come down and abduct me because they didn't want to deal with the law enforcement. And this is written in a memoir of my late stepfather, who is the person that my mother had married. This is his version of what I'm explaining now. is basically they didn't want to involve law enforcement. They didn't want to have to go through lengthy court hearings or anything like that. They just wanted to come down there, grab me, and come home. So instead of talking to my dad and asking him, hey, can she come and live with us or anything like that, no conversation, no attempt even to have a conversation with him. So they flew down to LA from Colorado and rented a car and drove over to the last known place. So she didn't even know where I was living at the time, if I was still living in the same place. So they decided to go ahead and try that. And that's when she saw me running up the stairs to my babysitter's house. It was real early in the morning. And because I knew everybody in that apartment complex, everybody knew who I was allowed to play down in the courtyard. There was families all over, in the apartment complex. So it was back then, it wasn't as unsafe as it is today. So as soon as I ran down the stairs and reached out to her, she was reaching out to me, she grabbed me and ran to the car that her husband was waiting in so that we could make a quick getaway. So as she's throwing me into the front seat of the car, she's pushing me closer and closer to this strange man in the middle of the front seat. As she's climbing in behind me, I'm trying to back out. She's trying to come in, and she's telling me, this is your new daddy. And she's full of excitement and I'm sure anxiety because they just nabbed a kid off a stairwell in Hollywood, California. So she's telling me this is my new daddy and asking me if I want to go on a boat ride. Well, I'm freaking out, traumatized, and I'm just shaking my head more than likely. This is her story, her version of it that I was just accommodating, going, yeah, let's. But I remember, I was almost 5 years old. I remember how terrified I was. And I was scared to death of this strange man who had this massive mustache and these big pilot sunglasses. And I didn't want anything to do with him. I'm thinking, he's not my daddy. And I just wanted out. So they drive me down from Hollywood down to San Diego, and we hit out on a houseboat for a week. And I was petrified of being on the houseboat because to me it felt like an earthquake. And just a few years prior to this, we went through one of the big earthquakes in LA, and I kept reliving that fear on this houseboat. When they finally felt safe and the investigation was dying down because the FBI was involved, there was all kinds of people volunteering, searching for this missing child from Hollywood, California. And they didn't want to take any chances at the airport. So they wanted to wait it out a little bit. So when they felt like the investigation was dying down a little bit, they moved to an airport where there was a private airplane that was ready to taxi and take off as soon as I was on board. So once we took off, that whole world and where I lived in California disappeared. It dissolved into thin air. And then I ended up landing in Boulder, Colorado. We lived in Broomfield, and I had a new house. I had a new bed, new clothes, toys, a new family, a new dad, and now a new stepsister. And the stepsister was not happy. She wasn't happy that her father married my mother to begin with. That was already a pain for her. And she was 10 years older. So I'm almost 5, she's 10. And she hated my mother, and then she hated the fact that she had a daughter on top of it. So I was instantly the redheaded stepchild and, tortured by this person who beat me up and violently abused me for the next 8 years. And when I was in 6th grade, and she never got caught. She was so good at just the way she did it. They never actually saw her do anything. So I would get punished for screaming when she punched me. So it was a double whammy. I was, abused by her, beat up by her, and then, smacked by my mom for scaring her with my scream. Because it was, when you hit somebody that hard in the muscle with, I think she used to call it the frog, where she'd have a knuckle up real high and she would punch that into my leg muscle, and it made me scream. It hurt. And because of that startling scream, my mom would turn around and slap me
Wow.
for scaring her. So this went on, over the next 8 years, that type of abuse, not necessarily the same kind, but I was in sixth grade and she was a senior in high school getting ready to take her finals so she could graduate, she wanted to sit outside in the sun. And I thought that was funny because she's strawberry blonde and blue eyed and very fair skinned, and she just basically burned and peeled. And I kept thinking, why are you going to sit outside? That's just torture. And so when she went out the sliding glass door, I shut the door and I locked it. It was a joke. I wasn't going to leave her locked out, but I was just feeling feisty, I guess, that day. And sometimes I've questioned myself about, you should have known better, Dawn. You should have known better than to lock her out, than to do anything that would jeopardize your safety. So over the years, that always molded in the back of my mind, but it was not my fault that I was attacked by this person. So when she realized that I locked her out, there's a glass door between me and her, and her face would basically just morph into what I called and referred to her often as the demon. She had features that changed, like the distance between her nose and her lip and the circles under her eyes, her cheekbones. It was just the weirdest thing. But as soon as in the eyes, as soon as I saw that, she is at the screen door with her nose nearly touching it, and I'm standing there with my hand still on the lock. So I'm pretty close to the door myself. But I felt like I was looking at the alien creature that you see on the movies
Yeah.
that just was about to devour me. And I thought, there's only a piece of glass between me and her. And I instantly knew my life was in danger. And she turned around and bolted around the house with almost unhuman like speed. It was just the weirdest thing. And I thought, oh my gosh, I need to get out of here. So I ran to the garage and got on my bike, went out the back of the garage door and around the corner. And she had been taking in the front door, and it was a solid oak door with solid oak frame. She laid that door flat inside the foyer to get to me. So she tore a hole in the wall of the house to come in and get to me. And that's why I knew I was in trouble. But she had caught me as I was coming around the corner with my bike. She met me at the corner and she lifted me off my bike by my neck. And she had such strength that she could lift me up. And then she proceeded to crush in on my throat. And all I remember was the lights just kind of getting darker. The darkness just kept going until it finally just blanked out. And what snapped her out of that was when our parents pulled in the driveway and she dropped me. And when I hit the ground, I just gasped in that life-saving breath and then got up and ran as fast as I could to get away from her. And the weird thing about it is that even though our parents saw what she was doing to me, when they finally got me to come home, because I was hiding at my neighbor's house, my friend's house, when they finally got me to come home and made me sit at the same table as this person that just tried to murder me, and they told us, we don't want to hear a word about it. Here's a pen and paper, write it down. And that's it. And at that moment, I knew that my life didn't have value. Nobody was there to protect my life. I didn't have security. I didn't have safety. I didn't have anything. I just knew that I had to survive, which was questionable at times. And there's times that I just wanted to not be here. And I heard this voice about, you're going to be needed someday, when I was standing later in high school. Is after she did go to college. After she went to college, I thought, finally, I'm free. I'm free of this person. I can deal with my mother and that abuse, but I'm free of this demon. But I wasn't free. So when we moved from Colorado. We had lived in Oregon at the time, actually. We moved a lot. We constantly moved, like almost every 2 years. But when we moved to California again, I was trying to share my story with people, and we were part of the LDS church, and I would share that with my friends at church, and they were like, "You're a liar. There's no way what you're telling us is you're just a flat out liar. He's your dad. Nobody abducted you. You're just lying." And so I was bullied and ridiculed all over again. And it just felt like nobody cares about what I do. So I would stand at the kitchen counter and I'd see a knife laying there and I'd think, what would it be like if I just wasn't here? And I just didn't want to be there. And I just closed my eyes. And the next thing you know, I hear that small voice that says, "You're going to be needed someday." And then instantly filled with hope that there is a purpose for me to be here. So then I was like, go on. And I would do what I do. And, I'd still try to share my story and I'd still be called a liar. And eventually, you stop talking about it because nobody cares. Nobody wants to hear it. They want you to stop talking about that trauma because I don't want to hear it. It's your trauma. Just keep it to yourself. And we shut people down. That's another thing I like to talk about too, is we shut people down when they have this kind of trauma, which silences our voice. So my voice was stamped out. I wasn't allowed to talk to anybody about it. And I thought it was taboo because when I did talk about it, it hurt. So fast forward, when I had my own children, my first child, I was holding them and I just felt this like enormous flood of overwhelming love for this little boy. And I thought, wow, what is that? What is this feeling? I just feel so overwhelmed. And that was unconditional love. This was the first time that I could recognize unconditional love. But I knew it before. I knew it before I was abducted. My dad and I had unconditional love, but I was taken from that. And that's when my insecurity began. So before that, life was great. And I had somebody, a parent that, cared for me and protected me and wanted me to be safe. And then I had this world of, from 5 years old on, that wasn't safe. So when I'm holding this little boy, I'm like, how could someone leave this little boy? How could someone leave me? And then it started connecting. She left me. How can she leave me when this is the feeling you have when you have a child? So maybe she didn't have this feeling for me. And that's when it really kind of sunk in that she wasn't capable of that kind of love. So I was angry for a long time, very angry with how my child turned out. And I said, I am not letting my kids grow up ever feeling like they're not loved. So when they got in trouble and they wanted a hug, they got a hug. They could be still crying from being punished, or, they knew they were in trouble, so they were feeling bad about it. And they wanted a hug, they got a hug. Because I wanted them to know, yeah, what you did was wrong. And I want you to learn from that. But no matter what, I always love you. So I didn't discipline my kids with force, with abuse. I mean, I did discipline them, but not anywhere like my mother did. So it was few and far between that I ever had to, smack their butts or anything like that. They were much easier, I think, to raise than probably me. I was very independent and my mom wasn't really good at that. So, but I didn't have the same kind of relationship with my kids that I have with my mom. So it didn't seem like it was as hard to raise a kid. So I still have this problem of understanding what was it about me that you didn't want or didn't love. So you have this self-doubt that's still lingering because it's unresolved. Just because someone shuts up doesn't mean things go away and things get better. It just means it's suppressed. So fast forward again, I start working in security and all of this starts coming through, and I finally find my dad in 2016. And that's when I'm able to really do some healing. The healing wasn't ever going to be possible without finding him, because he's the key to what I needed healed.
Yeah.
So finding him gave me an opportunity to learn about myself, who I was, and most importantly, that I was always loved and he always wanted me. Now, I grew up thinking that he didn't care, that he didn't put any effort in to try and find me, that all of these horrible things that just made me give up on him, that made me feel like if he's not going to take the time for me, then why should I even bother with him? You know, all these horrible negative thoughts. And when we were able to reunite, all of that love came back. It was so familiar. And that familiarity was that unconditional same feeling that I felt for my son. So we got to spend some time together just healing and learning about each other, but only for 2 years. Because then tragically in 2018, he passed away and anger set in all over again. Now I feel like I've missed out on so much and I've been robbed of my father twice in one life. And it was just too much. It was so hard to really work through that and understand that. And and I found out I had brothers and I have a bigger family. And that was so important to me. So even though it's so frustrating that I lost my father, I was blessed to have him for those 2 years, to have him long enough to do some healing that I really needed. So that healing was so important. That's the most important part of the whole journey because it closes a lot of those wounds. And now I can focus on what was important for me as a child, the bullying. And I had my own groomer. My mom brought, or not my mom, my stepfather brought home somebody that ended up being a child predator. And he was invited into our home and sitting at the dinner table next to me. So, I've had experiences with that. It just wasn't online. I had one groomer sitting at my table. I don't have a phone full of them sitting at my table like kids do today. Every single phone has a predator close by. And I think that when parents realize that there are over 500,000 online predators at any given time, and there's 74 million children in the United States, according to the 2020 census. If you divide those numbers, that's 148 kids that each predator needs to contact in order to reach every single child in the country. Not saying that that's going to happen, but the odds are all kids have some kind of contact at some point. They're that close to a predator. So this is why I do what I do, because I know what it's like from just my little experience, and amplify that by the internet and the world, the global presence of that. It's more important now than ever. So my epiphany brought me here. That all of that happened for me. All of the tragedy, the bullying, the violence, it's not something today that I think that happened to me. It happened for me so that I could be here and speak about this and help parents realize kids need security. They need to feel safe, and that's the parent's job. It's the parent's job to protect their kids. And I need to help them learn how to be their kids' online safety hero, to make them digital parenting pros so that they can have a conversation with their very tech savvy kids and not feel lack of confidence, right? You need that confidence. And that's what I want to give people, is confidence to speak to their children and not feel like they're just out of the league. So I started not knowing what a mouse was. And all the parents today know what a mouse is. I didn't know what a mouse with a tail that was connected to a device was when I started this. So if I can get to this point, starting off with not knowing what a mouse was, then I know that I can teach you guys how to be digital parenting pros.
Oh, Dawn. This is the
That was rough.
second This is the
Mm.
second time I've heard your story, and it still, like, yeah, brings me to tears. But wow. Whew. So now you know why Dawn is so passionate about what she does. Um, you know, it's just amazing the journey that you've been on. And I love how you can see it in a different perspective that has happened for you rather than to you. Because, I mean, I think all of us, every single human has a tendency to go, why did this happen to me? But for you to be able to have that perspective change, that means that you've, done a lot of healing. This question kind of came up, and I just wanted to ask this question before we dive in a little bit more about the security piece. What age did you leave your mum and your stepdad?
That's a good question. I was only 15 years old when I left the house, and
Wow.
there was some trouble with the church. I was being threatened to be excommunicated because of rumors. Now, there was some truth to some of the rumors, but they had rumors crisscrossed and information. They didn't have all of the information. And I was a minor. When you have the bishop of your church calling you and saying, we are going to put you through church court and you're going to have to sit in a room full of what was 30, 40, 50-year-old men, and I'm 15 years old, and I have to sit in there by myself without my parents while they judge me and determine whether or not I'm guilty of the law of chastity, breaking the law of chastity. And I thought, I don't want to talk about any of that with these old men. And why would I talk to, and have you talked to my parents? And they're like, nope, this is between you and us. And I'm like, that's not cool.
Mm.
And I copped a major attitude at church that Sunday when I found out who told the bishop and how it got there. And so when I found out it was the bishop's first counselor's wife, who I never even talked to, she just heard these bits and pieces, and she goes and she tells her husband, you go and you tell the bishop. And I'm like, I threatened to kick her ass right there in the parking lot. I'm 15 years old, and I'm like, I am going to murder this person. I was so mad. Not that I would murder that person, but I just really had it. That was my breaking point. Having this church tell me that I'm not worthy to be a member of this church. And it was just the last thing I needed to hear. One more rejection was not what I needed. So I was out. I'm like, I'm gone. I'm out. I'm leaving. You can keep this church. You can keep this life. I'm out of here. So instead of me just leaving and being homeless, we did set up and arrange for me to go live with my my stepsister, which she had already been married and had a son. So, and they were living in Hawaii. So when my mom said, would you go and stay with her instead of just leaving? I'll buy you a ticket. I was like, Hawaii? Yeah, I'll go to Hawaii. So I did. I ended up going and living with her. And that was an interesting twist because for so long I was afraid of her, but I was a gymnast. I was a varsity gymnast in high school, and I could bench press over my body weight. And she was like, I would be afraid of you in a dark alley. It's just, she was like, nope. There will be no problems here. She was afraid of me now. And she had a son, so her temperament had changed a little bit. So we were pretty close, the closest we'd ever been for almost 2 years when I lived there. And then I moved back to the mainland. And that was the only time. Every other time we've been at odds. So for that little brief moment, we got along for the sake of, I think, for her kids. And she was really terrified about disciplining them because I think she was afraid she couldn't stop once she started. So I think what happened with me kind of stuck in the back of her head. And she thought, if I start that with my own son, will I be able to stop? And it was scary. So just a few years after that, she ended up getting a head injury, and then she was finally diagnosed with bipolar and schizophrenic tendencies or something, I think. yeah, schizophrenic tendencies. So what I knew was that she was a demon that kind of morphed in front of my face. Nobody would believe me about that, but now we know that it's part of her like genetics. She
Mm.
inherited this from her grandmother who had DID, and she became a completely different person and ended up dying as that other person, not even
Oh,
recognizing or ever living in her real identity. So it was passed down through that. So I can understand, the problem that was there, that she was not getting the help she needed. I was not getting the help I needed. When
yeah.
I was injured, I wasn't taken to the doctor unless I broke a leg. That was the only time my mom took me to the hospital. When my head was being bashed into the ground, I didn't get a scan to see if I had a concussion. When she strangled me, right there in the front yard of our neighborhood, they didn't take me to the doctors to see if I was okay, if I had any brain damage or anything like that. Nothing. So they didn't get her help either.
Yeah.
And her mom left her with her father. So it gets
Mm.
ironic from here. So now we have this similarity, and I have to feel that, a lot of this wasn't her fault, even though she's the one that carried it out. So I'll never forget that.
Mm.
But if you look at the epigenetics and if you understand how trauma is carried out through DNA, she had a mental health disorder that went undiagnosed until
Yeah.
she was in her 20s, and nobody got her help. So I feel for that. I
Mm.
will I will feel for that. I don't condone what she did, never will. But I can at least pause and understand that some things were not in her control.
Mm. Yeah.
And I blame who didn't get us help.
Yeah.
So they're more responsible. Her father is more responsible than she is, because he never even thought anything of it. He chalked this all off to be sibling rivalry, and he didn't want to deal with it. Neither one of them were they didn't want to be parents. They liked the optics of being a parent. They liked the sound of being a parent, but they don't actually want to be the parent.
Yeah.
So that made things pretty difficult.
Oh,
So when I was getting excommunicated, or threatened to be excommunicated when I left, my mom actually had me sign emancipation papers, because she said that when I leave, that she won't be responsible for me once I walk out her door.
wow.
So I was a legal adult at the age of 15, moving to Hawaii to live with my demon stepsister. And my mom had no problem saying, so long.
Wow, Dawn. I didn't know that part of the story, but wow, like the things
It
that you
just
have
keeps
gone
going.
through is just completely mind blowing to me. Like but what I love is that, we can, you know, put ourselves in your shoes in like just that little moment to kind of get that understanding and go, wow, there are people out there who have all these experiences, but look at what they're doing in the world.
Yeah, and that's the hard part too, is if you have no way of finding a path to healing, if you're not introduced to it, if you're not supported, or even find any kind of value. I think the value for me came after I left home. My life did change, and it not always in the best way, but I was around people that at least liked me. And I stopped talking about what happened to me as a child. So I didn't have that ruining any of my relationships, because I just keep it quiet until I got married. And then I told my husband, but it wasn't urgent as much as it was when I was a kid. So it was just something that had happened, and it was in the past, and it was okay. So I think people really need to have the platform to open up their mouths and talk about what happened to them,
Yeah.
because that's how we heal. We have to express it. If we're not expressing what we've gone through, then we're suppressing. And as long as we're suppressing, we're in a victim mode.
Mm.
And if we stay in a victim mode, we won't get the help that we need,
Yeah.
because it's really hard to see past the victim part of it.
Yeah.
So we have to be able to speak. We need to talk, and even if it's just with a therapist, it doesn't have to be on a podcast. Nobody needs to do this. I'm doing this because I'm trying to spread awareness, and hopefully someone out there who's gone through something I've gone through or something similar can see that they just need to use their voice, and they can choose how they use their voice. But they need to know that if I can do this, then you can too. And you can do it in a safe way, in a setting that you're comfortable with. But you need to start talking. You need to secure your own inner child, because that's who you are deep down inside. And if you don't reconnect with that true inner self, you're not living authentically.
Yeah. Thank you. That was really powerful. Yeah. And when we express, we release the shame because a lot of it has to do with feeling shame of what has happened in the past. And when we speak about it, we let go of that shame because we are
Yeah,
making it known
exactly.
and it's part of the healing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Shame is really, really damaging.
It is.
It's counterproductive too, and it really can hold us back. So
Yes.
it's really important that we do let we have that release.
Yeah. So Dawn, am I looking at the time? I'm like, I need you to come back. But um, just I would really love to touch on the security piece for parents because for me as a parent to young children who are starting on their online journey, what is the most important thing that parents or people need to know about protecting themselves in the online space?
I think one of the biggest obstacles is the fear of technology, but they need to understand that technology can actually be your tool. So you don't need to fear technology, you need to leverage technology. You don't have to know everything about technology, because even I don't know everything about technology. There's parts of this industry that is so big now that you just can't know it all. So that's why there's so much need, because we have different areas in the security field that there's just a lot of need. There's a lot of positions in cybersecurity, so you don't have to know it all, but you don't have to be an industry expert. You just need access to one. So I'm your industry expert, and I can help you learn what you need to know, not everything. You don't need to open up and swallow everything. There's just specific things that once you learn the basics, then you'll be able to understand and learn and navigate your way through it. And I'm always there to help with that navigation. So my courses they're being completely redone because we've needed to amp up and kind of modernize the training. So everything's going to be starting brand new, and I'm excited about the direction that that's going. So it's
Yeah.
really going to be more helping parents become that hero and helping them on their hero's journey to being that security expert. And I don't mean security like you have to be cybersecurity. I mean your child's security
Mm,
expert.
yeah. I love that. Just from what you're talking about, I I'm assuming that it's not just about security, it's also about the relationship and making your child feel safe outside
The
of the online
communication.
space. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is very
I'm going to help
important.
parents learn how to talk to their kids about tech.
Yeah.
When you learn the little lingo and the acronyms and things that seem so overwhelming because there's so much of it, but if I show you where to find out or how to find out,
Mm,
then you have tools. I'm going to build a toolbox for you. And then you can tap into whatever tool you need to use in every single home is going to need different tools because this isn't a cookie cutter. It's every family gets to make the decision on what kind of security needs they need to put in place. We have different needs, different children with different age groups. So it's age appropriateness. So there's all kinds of things that make each toolbox a little bit different than the other. Some parents may not want, like my kids, I was in criminal justice and a cybersecurity person. My poor kids did not have MySpace. They were not allowed to even have, they had a shared email address, but they were not on Facebook until they were adults. In fact, I wasn't even on Facebook until 2015, 2016, like 2015. And that's where I found my dad. So I should have been on Facebook maybe sooner to find him, but with all the stuff that I hear about all the time as a cybersecurity person, and then with the criminal justice side, it was like, oh, you are not going on. Nope, that social media stuff is dangerous.
Yeah.
And in a way, it is. It still is. It still is very dangerous. And one of the analogies I use, and I'll do this real quick, but when we set our kids in front of a computer screen, so this screen right here, you're looking at me, but where am I? I'm on a different side of the world. I'm in a different hemisphere from you. And we are sitting less than 2 feet away from each other. Yeah. So that is pretty astounding. That's pretty significant. And it's amazing that we can do that. And we should be able to. There should not be any problem or any reason why we can't do this. The problem comes in with those cyber creeps. And those cyber creeps are trying to ruin that and take that away from us and take the security away from our kids. So when we set our kids in front of this monitor, you're setting them in front of the world. You're opening up the doorway to the world, not to your front yard. So if you set boundaries for your kids in your yard and you say, okay, well, you're a toddler, so you can stay on the porch here with me. And that's as far as you can go. But then they're in elementary school, so you let them play out in the grass a little bit. Toddlers have to stay on the porch, but the elementary school kids can play in the grass. And then when they're a little older, a little more older in the elementary grades, you might let them play in the backyard by themselves without you having to sit there and watch them, right? And then when they're teenagers, they can walk around the block, maybe walk over a couple blocks, maybe they can go into town with their friends. So you have these boundaries for these kids, and these are very close to home, very close to home. But when you have a kid on the internet, what's your boundary? How far can they go?
Yeah.
Because right now I'm in Florida and you're in Australia. So this is how far your kid can go.
Yeah.
Easily. And it may not be Australia. It might not be the United States. Where else could they be? So you just don't know where these predators are from. And they have the same access that you and I have. But they're a little shady with it. So that's why it's important that we teach parents how to set those boundaries for the kids. The kids want to be free on the internet, but unfortunately, it's just not logical. It's not realistic. When you have a teenager that wants to drive a car, what do? It's a 3,000-pound vehicle. And we're going to give it over to a 16-year-old and say, here's the keys, go drive. Okay, but what do they have to do before they get those keys? They have to take driver's ed and they have to have good grades, or they can't take driver's ed. So if they take driver's ed, that's a whole semester or 2 semesters now. I don't even know how long.
I think it's different in Australia.
Yeah, but then they have to drive around with that teacher and they have to learn how to do it with all these kids in the car. So there's peer pressure and, but they have this going on at school now, and then they can get a permit if they pass. When they get the permit, that means that they have to drive with someone who is licensed in the car with them for a certain amount of time. And they have to have so many hours of that before they can even take the test, the written test to drive a car. Once they take the written test, then they have to actually take a solo driving test with a licensed person that can pass them or not, to give them that little card that says you are legally allowed to drive. So take all of that we put these kids through before they can drive a 3,000-pound vehicle that can really cause a lot of property damage or bodily damage. But when you compare that to the internet has a lot more damage that, possibilities. There's a lot more crime that happens. There's a lot more depression and anxiety and social situations that are appearing left and right. So there's a lot of emotional and mental health concerns. This wellness is really becoming a very big concern, but we're not even making them take a test. When they're old enough to hold on to a device, we're handing it to them. We're saying, here you go, watch Susie Q, watch Elsa, watch Elmo. It's entertaining and it's fun to watch our kids be excited about watching something like that. Sometimes it is a pacifier, but we're not thinking about that scroll that they're going to learn to do next. And they're going to click on that Elsa picture because that's their favorite. But guess who cyber creeps are using for their video thumbnails? They're using Elsa.
Yeah.
Because they know your kid will click on that picture. So these are things that I think we have to help parents realize, that you have to be a step ahead of those cyber creeps to keep your kids safe.
So much gold there. And, and that's why I prefer my kids watching TV over having a device. They actually I don't actually even have an iPad at home. I only have laptops, and she can only go on to do certain things on there. So, yeah. But at the same time, I also know, like, this is the world that she needs to learn about it as well. So what you do is so important.
We can't take it. Yeah. We can't take it from them. Technology is part of their world.
Yeah.
And it's only going to increase. What we have to do is teach them how to use it safely. And when they're young, that means keeping them in an age restricted or age appropriate group of technology.
Yeah.
So nobody that's under the age of 13 should have a cell phone. Yeah. There's just so much. Now, I know we're giving it to kids at 10, and it's handy for us to be connected, and parents want to be connected. They want to be able to call their kid anywhere at any time, no matter where they are. I get that. I totally get that. Unfortunately, what they're doing with that cell phone is part of what parents need to have a control over. And so that's what we need to teach. How do you protect your 10-year-old? If you're going to give the 10-year-old a phone, how are you keeping him from being in chat rooms or playing games all day?
Yeah.
How are we putting those boundaries in place?
Yeah. And like you say, like when you experienced, your journey, everything was in the physical reality. Now there's, as you said, you're opening up, anyone can bully you. It's not just, the person in your class. It's not just your sibling, step sibling. It is the whole world being able to bully you if they so wish to. And these people, these people hide behind personas that is not even them, is not their real name. You don't know who they are.
Yeah. So anybody can create a profile, and we see the type of reaction people give if you say something they don't agree with. We call them cyber trolls, where they just come off and really just attack. They go on this attack, like this emotional attack. And kids are not emotionally developed, and they're not capable of handling these situations until they're way into their 20s, 25, 26, 27 years old, before that frontal cortex really develops enough for them to actually make sound decisions and to think of security. Kids are curious by nature, which makes them spontaneous, and they're not thinking about security. Technology is all the wow right now. And the better the device, the more popular they are. I got this, I got that, I use these, I use this, I have that account. Nobody wants to say I'm not allowed to use a cell phone. That's hard in this day and age. Yeah. So we can't say don't do it, We just have to make sure that we're doing it as safe as possible.
Yeah. And, just adding on, even adults when they're in their, 40s, if you've been trolled, you see people that commit suicide because they were
Yeah.
trolled and they're like full grown adults. So it's
My
not,
flagship course talks about cyberbullying, especially for children, and it's specifically on Amanda Todd's story. I don't know if you know who Amanda Todd is, but she was blackmailed basically for a nude selfie, and it turned into a very tragic story. Now, Amanda's parents, they cared and they wanted what's best for her. They wanted to keep her safe. They did everything they could to help her. But this cyber creep just wouldn't stop. He wouldn't stop harassing her. He kept finding her, and she just wasn't able to feel safe. She wasn't able to feel secure. And at that point, it wasn't because of her parents at all. It was because this cyber creep had the reach. And at that point in time, we hadn't progressed into technology the way it is today. So not all the tools are available then that are now.
mm,
And I think it's great that we do have some of these tools, but sometimes those tools can be overwhelming. Like, which one do I really need? Which one works, the best? Well, it depends. What do you need? Do you need to do, are you just protecting a 3-year-old, or are you protecting a teenager? And then what other types of tools do you want to apply? Are you wanting to, block? Are you wanting to have monitoring done? And to what degree do you want that monitor? So it's a lot of personal preference that we have to build into it.
yeah,
But learning that is overwhelming. That's why you need access to a cyber expert.
to Dawn. Oh, Dawn, I can talk to you all day, but I'm just looking at the time and I need to wrap it up. So, just a couple more questions for you. The first one is, what would you like our audience to take away with them from our conversation today?
I want you to walk away with the confidence knowing that you can be your security expert for your kids. You just need a little bit of knowledge in a toolbox.
Thank you. Very, very important. And Dawn, what is currently setting your soul on fire?
Oh, the digital safe zone right now. I have
Yes.
created a digital safe zone that just kind of incorporates a lot of what I'm doing. And so depending on which zone you're interested in, that's where you go. So I have a digital parenting zone, and I have some, technical training, security 101. So if maybe you don't have kids at home, but you still want to learn how to protect yourself, or maybe you have access to other kids or family members that you want to keep safe, elderly family members that we need to keep safe. We have a lot of scenarios that we need
Mm,
to focus on. So right now I am in content creation mode, just really kind of building and putting all this new stuff out there.
mm,
So
yeah.
that's what's got me on fire right
Can't wait. Can't wait. Because I'm definitely interested in what you have to offer. And Dawn, so I'm just so grateful for our conversation today. You're just such a beautiful human and just whew, like just amazing, beautiful human. Thank you for sharing your love and wisdom with us. If people want to know more about you or how they can get access to, your course, where's the best place to find you?
You can go to securingeverything.com, and that's my webpage, and it has some information there. We're rebuilding everything, so we don't have a course that we're starting yet, but it's going to be soon, hopefully this summer. Going to be kicking things off towards the end of June. June is Internet Safety Month, so I'm going to be trying to put out a lot of content about that and keeping kids safe online. So we have different timeframes of the year that we focus on certain things. So we have Cybersecurity Awareness Month that we do in October, which is focused on a lot of businesses. But Internet Safety Month is really about keeping kids safe online.
Nice. Thank you so much, Dawn. I'll have all your details in the show notes so people can reach out to you. Thank you once again for this wonderful conversation.
Oh, absolutely loved it. Happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me and listening to the story.